Hello and welcome to Study Abroad and School Experience. On today's video, you're going to be seeing a presentation on financial aid for grad school that I attended virtually a few weeks ago. Enjoy.
My name is Kevin. I work at Idealist. I'm joined by my colleague Andrea and our pal Kevin from NYU Wagner. We're going to start the presentation in just about a minute. We're going to let a few more folks just kind of log in and get settled. Anytime during today's broadcast, feel free to use the discussion tab on the right. If you have questions for Idealist or if you have questions for Kevin from Wagner, please feel free to post them in there. At the end of our presentation, we'll do our best to answer a few of them. We'll do our best to answer some of them, I think, in line in the discussion tab, but then we'll also ask Kevin some of these questions as well live. He's got a lot of advice and tips for all of you today. Thank you again for joining us. We're going to give it one more minute and we'll get started. See more people. I see we have Denise from Manila. Hello. Taiwan. Massachusetts. Nashville. This is great. All right, I think we're going to get started here. So 1:06 our time. Let's jump into it. Hi, everybody. My name is Kevin. I'm joined by my colleague Andrea. We work at Idealist, and then we're also joined by our pal Kevin, who works at NYU Wagner. And we are so excited to welcome you to the virtual Idealist Grad Fair today. Today we're featuring over 70 different schools that are here. They're excited to meet you and tell you more about their programs and different degrees that can help you make a difference. I really want to send a special thank you to our friends at NYU Wagner School of Public Service. To post any questions you might have for Idealist or for Kevin in the discussion tab to the right. We'll do our best to answer some of them in line, and at the end we'll answer a few of those questions live. And I think on that note, I'm going to hand it over to you, Kevin.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Kevin, Andrea, for allowing us to host. Thank you all for attending the session today. I'm just going to go ahead and quickly share my screen here so that we can go ahead and get started. So, Kev, can you see that?
That's great.
Perfect. Okay. So as Kevin mentioned, my name is Kevin Lee. I'm the Director of Admissions and Financial Aid here at the NYU Wagner School of Public Service. And yeah, we're very lucky to be able to kind of even continue this format and give this presentation. So what I want to do today is just really talk about some of your options in terms of how to pay and finance your graduate school education. Now, I think it's a great topic, really just thinking about this format and thinking as you are looking and searching for the schools that make the most sense is really thinking about what questions you want to ask and how to really kind of best prepare for paying for graduate school. So I want to preface this by saying, obviously, that there are going to be a number of different ways to pay for your graduate school education, but really the search process is very much individualistic. You really want to make sure you take the time to do your research, talk to those schools, talk to those financial aid advisors about what options are available. But what I want to focus on today are really just some of the more general options in which we tend to at least see students in terms of the ways in which they finance their education. So the three things that we'll kind of really focus on today is one, obviously the funding in which you don't have to pay back, which can take the form of scholarships, fellowships, research assistantships overall in general. That could be very different from each school that you're applying to and looking into. The second is federal student loan options. So this is, of course, through the free application for federal student aid. So again, we'll talk a little bit through some of the options that you can qualify for there. And then finally, we understand that because of the cost of graduate school, sometimes many students will have to, unfortunately, go to private school loan options, looking at banks or other lenders externally. But again, if you do take away anything from this, it's really just to make sure to kind of do your own individual research, because there is really, unfortunately, no one size fits all. So, there are a lot of opportunities, a lot of options, and a lot of resources out there. So it's certainly more than even just what I'm going to cover today. But hopefully this should give you a good step in the right direction of the questions you want to ask and how you want to approach this process. So first, of course, let's start with the funding that you don't have to pay back. So there are a variety of different ways in which you can go ahead and do so. The first, of course, and of course not everyone will have this luxury, but to really be able to utilize some of your savings to be able to pay for graduate school. Now, obviously, this is beneficial because it might mean that you don't have to take out loans. You don't have to pay the additional interests that might come along with those loans as well. But really, the key point here is making sure you really kind of create a specific budget for yourself. And that even includes for those students who aren't using their personal savings as a way of financing their education. We like to think about educational expenses just as your monthly expenses and factoring that into your budget. But it's incredibly important to really structure and think about your budget moving forward. As even if you're taking out loans, you want to take out loans only that you need to take out. And so obviously not to kind of overburden yourself with taking out more than you actually need. But moving on, let's talk a little bit about just some of the other funds that you don't actually have to pay back. So these, of course, take the form of scholarships, fellowships, assistantships. Scholarships, of course, are always kind of provided by the donors or the institutions themselves in which you're looking for. They can be either need-based, they can be merit-based. So again, a really good question to ask the schools in which you're looking at today about what are those scholarship options, what are those restrictions, what are those requirements for those scholarships. Another one is fellowships. These are oftentimes also provided by donors of the school, and they may also require additional requirements, essays, or interview processes. I think oftentimes the great thing about fellowships is that many of them often include an internship or some type of living stipend or working stipend. So really another great way to kind of help finance the other portions of your education. But assistantships, another really good resource. There's research-based assistantships, teaching-based, graduate employment-based. These usually take the form of working either with faculty members or working with staff members or even working at the schools in which you're actually attending to kind of help offset some of the cost of your education. So really think about asking those schools in which you're applying for about what other assistantship options there may be. Some have them, some don't. Some maybe have a limited number of spots. Some maybe oftentimes require you to reach out to faculty members. So really, again, kind of do your research and think about exactly what makes the most sense for you. Another really good resource is external fellowships and scholarships. Now, I talk, and many schools will, of course, talk about the scholarship options that they have, the fellowship options that they have, but there are actually a lot of external fellowship and scholarship options that students sometimes forget to apply for. And so these are usually oftentimes not associated with the schools themselves, but they can be associated with other professional organizations, service year organizations, for example. I know Wagner, we oftentimes have a number of students who are applying from places like AmeriCorps or Teach for America who already have some type of tuition assistance coming from their association with these organizations that, of course, will help provide funding. What we tend to do, and again, maybe not the case for all schools, but there are some schools that match that specific assistance that's provided by those professional organizations. That's as another incentive to apply as well. So really think about what other associations you may be a part of or what other external funding options you may be able to apply for. Many schools also, including Wagner, have an external scholarship directory that lists a number of other external sources that are outside or not directly tied to Wagner itself. And then finally, and of course not lastly, there is the employment tuition assistance, which many of our students are also taking advantage of. And so you want to oftentimes talk to your HR division, talk to your employer about any type of tuition assistance they may have available as part of your benefits at work. Sometimes they might offer a small percentage, maybe $5,000, $10,000, but really anything is worth just not having to take out a loan. So if you can get some type of funding, that's still fantastic. And I think it's a good way to really kind of start the conversation with your employer about, maybe having to have more of a flexible work schedule or anything like that if you are able to work at the same time. So again, I think these are just a few of the options. I certainly can go into more detail, but in fact, actually, I will talk a little bit more specifically. So I want to give you just a blanket example of maybe kind of how you might want to approach some of the conversation. So to give you an example of what we do at Wagner here, we provide scholarships, we provide fellowships and assistantships by the priority deadline. Now, what that means is that for students who are applying by this November 30th date, they essentially have the highest probability of getting some type of funding available. Now, when you are reaching and talking with other schools, you might want to ask that as well, whether there is a specific deadline in which you would have to apply by in order to qualify for a lot of these funding options. Now, at NYU Wagner, we offer a number of competitive need-based as well as merit-based scholarships to help finance your degree. Again, talk to your schools. Is it need-based? Is it merit-based? What are some other additional requirements? We are available to approximately give 25% of our enrolling students some type of reward. And so most schools should have something very similar in terms of at least giving you information about how much aid they're able to offer their students. Maybe it's 50%, maybe it's 75%, but it might be good actually in thinking about, depending on how important the financial piece is, whether you want to apply to that school or not. And for Wagner, all scholarships are awarded through the application or the admissions process, with all full-time and part-time degree students seeking candidates being considered. Now, again, we are, I guess, one of the unique schools in which we actually offer full-time and part-time degree student or options for our students. So the timing is also really important. So in thinking about your scholarship options, you want to ask them whether or not there are any timing restrictions. Is there a minimum credit requirement? Do you have to be taking 6 or more credits in order to qualify for a scholarship? So, again, this is just another callback to the number of different restrictions and rules around scholarships for many different schools, and that it's not always going to be consistent from school to school. So really worth having that conversation with that financial aid counselor or advisor at that school. I listed a couple of the fellowships here as well, and just to give you a sense of kind of what sometimes they might include. We have fellowships that offer full tuition. Some of them offer a summer internship. Some of them offer kind of a living stipend as well. So another really great way, I think fellowships are oftentimes kind of not spoken enough or not referred to enough in ways to help kind of finance that education. But if you are interested, again, we can certainly have more of a conversation in our booth in a little bit. But I want to quickly move on to just the federal student loan options. And of course, this takes the form of the free application. So if you are a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen, you can actually go ahead and fill out this form. And if you are a recent undergrad, if you went to undergrad here in the States, you're already quite familiar with the FAFSA form. But it is something that we also strongly encourage graduate students to complete, because it does allow them, a few more loan options that might carry a lower interest rate than sometimes more of the private loan options that you might find at banks or other lenders. But this is a form, of course, you want to make sure to complete as early as possible. And I oftentimes also recommend students to fill them out simultaneously as you complete your application, just so that you have them hand in hand. But it is a form that needs to be completed on a yearly basis, just because your financial situation might change on a yearly basis. So might the compensation and what you might receive from the federal government. But I've listed here just a few options, again, that we see as the most common ways in which students will utilize or take out federal student loan options. The first is the federal direct unsubsidized loan, which allows a student to qualify for up to $20,500 per academic year, with a current interest rate of 4.3% for loans dispersed after July 1st, 2020. Now, the reason why I wanted to include that information is because the interest rate actually changes every single year. So on July 1st, you want to go ahead and make sure you find out exactly how much that interest rate will be or whether that changes. Of course, that's going to be important as you factor that into your monthly or your yearly budget and your educational costs. Another really kind of popular one is the Federal Direct Graduate Plus loan. And this actually covers up to the cost of attendance. And this is also carrying a current interest rate of 5.3% for anything after July 1st. Again, this changes as well. So you want to make sure you go ahead and check the interest rates and factor that in on a yearly basis. The major difference with this plus loan award is that it's actually credit-based. So it oftentimes depends on the student or the individual borrower's credit itself. So in some cases, you may be asked for a cosigner or someone else to kind of help take out that loan if necessary. But it does cover up to the cost of attendance. And what we actually find is at Wagner, we have a combination of students who are awarded scholarship along with unsubsidized loans or along with the Graduate Plus loan. So just a couple of options for you to think about. Another one is of course, federal work study. And this is also, again, funding that's awarded to students to work on campus jobs to help pay for living expenses. And so, these, again, could be utilized for educational purpose. It could be used for your daily expenses, but it's just another way to help finance even some of your daily and regular expenses while you are in grad school. But again, I want to make sure to shout out that responsible borrowing is really important, right? I mean, we understand that the graduate school process is it sometimes can be an investment in your time and your resources, and certainly your financial resources and your effort. So you want to make sure that when you are borrowing responsibly. Make sure to kind of sit down, go through your finances, talk with a financial advisor, and really think about exactly how much you need to borrow. What we find too much here at the school is that we see students who are borrowing more than they actually need, and oftentimes they have to pay for that interest. I mean, they pay for the interest on those additional loans, which continues to add up. So you want to be very strategic and intentional and take your time to do the research about borrowing responsibly. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about just some of the private graduate school loan options. Now, of course, again, we understand that sometimes students will have to utilize this as another a way of financing their education. But, just as if with any other loans, and maybe even more so than any other loans, you want to make sure to do your research. These are even more varied in the type of restrictions, and the type of rules, and the type of interest rates that they grant. So many banks and credit unions often offer private graduate school loans, but these are oftentimes very much credit-based. They have fixed, sometimes variable rates, interest rates, or variable interest rates depending on the year. Each of them will have its own application process. And so you really want to make sure you do your research and figure out exactly what lender or what private lender makes the most sense for you and suits your needs, right? Again, not every single individual who's applying to grad school is in the same exact financial situation. So making sure to take the time to assess what your needs are and the private graduate school loan that best suits what you need. So again, some important questions to consider when you are having these conversations is, what are sort of the different payment plans that are offered? What are in-school or deferment plans offered? What happens in the event in which you're unable to make your payments? So these are all really good questions to ask, and something, again, to really kind of hone in on if you are kind of pursuing this route. One last thing I do want to mention here really quickly, the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program is a really fantastic program that allows students to forgive the remaining balance on their direct loans after having made 120 qualifying monthly payments and under a qualifying repayment plan while working full-time for a qualifying employer. Now, that's a lot, right? That's a lot of qualifiers, but again, it's still another option for you to think about, especially if you are deciding to work in the public service field or the nonprofit sector, to really be able to help you forgive some of those loans that you've taken out as part of your graduate school education. But I've actually listed the website on the very bottom of the slide here so that you can learn a little bit more about kind of what some of those qualifiers mean, how to define them. Quite frankly, we can probably do an entire hour-long session on just the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program itself. But in all honesty, I mean, it's very dependent on what you plan to do. But again, I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention it here. Seeing as maybe hopefully many of the students who are here for the Idealist Fair are planning for nonprofit or even public service careers. But if you have questions, we actually do organize a specific session specifically on this program and how to qualify and what to do in order to ensure that you are qualified under this program at our Wagner school. So if you have more questions, if you want to learn more, you can always feel free to drop by our booth, and we can always kind of walk you through that process, or at least let you know when we're hosting another one of these presentations. But again, it's another option to really help think about paying for your graduate school investment. So and with that, I want to thank you and open up for questions.
Okay, so I thought that there was additional footage regarding the Q&A session, but I suppose not, because I did record that, but I've been having storage issues anyway. Take care, be safe, stay well. Ciao.